Yep, that's a nice representation of how Konami has treated Silent Hill. Remember that time frame in the late 2000s to early 2010s when Japanese studios were pushing hard to appeal to the West? Some studios tried to make their games more Western friendly. Some shift their IPs off to Western studios for development. What did we end up with? A miserable pile of disappointments. Franchises losing their way. Besides Nintendo, who sent some of their IPs out west like Metroid, I can't think of a Japanese company that found success with this approach long term. Konami and the Silent Hill series is one of the more notable examples of a franchise losing its way during this time. Unproven studios were given the keys to a franchise that was tough to handle, Konami making all kinds of questionable decisions about the direction of the series. There were exceptions in this western run of Silent Hill titles, but the overall output fell well short of what Team Silent was able to achieve. And all these years later, Konami is doing it again, shipping the IP out to Western developers with one exception, and the remake of Silent Hill 2. They dropped the ball almost a decade back when Hideo Kojima was given the chance to take the series in a new direction, something I covered in a previous video if you're interested. In this video we'll take a look back on the Western Silent Hill titles. We'll also take a look at the upcoming titles that Konami announced for the series in October of 2022. Note that there will be spoilers not only for the games I'm covering here, but also the Team Silent titles. For this video I will cover Origins, Homecoming, Shattered Memories, and Downpour. For Origins, Shattered Memories, and Downpour, I emulated their PSP, Wii, and Xbox 360 versions respectively. For Homecoming, I played the PC version. This was the only title of the batch that got a PC release. It's from that time frame where PC ports were in the doghouse. Sunbrace Soul patched up to work on modern operating systems and fix a bunch of bugs. Even then, it still has a number of issues. I gotta give credit for doing that for a title that's not great by any stretch of the imagination. What about Book of Memories? I had every intention of covering it in this video. Problem is, PlayStation Vita emulation is still in its infancy. The game is unable to boot as of writing with Vita 3K. Spending a couple $100 on a Vita to play one game with a mediocre reputation didn't seem worth it. I will keep an eye on Vita emulation and cover it another time. To make up for it, I will be covering one of the Silent Hill mobile titles, the point-and-click Silent Hill Orphan. I didn't plan on covering a mobile game, but some mad lad made a Doom mod on the first part of Silent Hill Orphan. As far as I know, this is the only point-and-click title done in the Doom engine.
I can't stop thinking about you, Travis. I want you. You're all I think about. Let's get the hell out of this crazy town. Run off. The two of us. We could be so good together. See? I could be a star!
It's a bit of a miracle how good Silent Hill Origins turned out, all things considered with its development. Yes, it has major issues. Plot issues that clash with the first Silent Hill. It's comical how many weapons we could pick up and use before they degrade. Yet picking up the scraps of troubled development, a team was able to make something out of Origins. In about 9 months, developer Climax Studios took the leftover scraps and put it together of what would become Origins. A flawed title, but it has its moments, and could have been far worse. The LA team of Climax Studios had a first go at Origins. How did this studio get Konami's blessing? Climax Studios had experience working with the PSP. Initial plans were to be a remake of the first Silent Hill. This would change to be a prequel with ties to the original. In hindsight, the team said it was a terrible idea but didn't have any wiggle room with Konami. It was going to be an over-the-shoulder perspective, play more like Resident Evil 4. The story was going to be dark comedy, with the show Scrubs being the inspiration. Now, I've never watched Scrubs, but I am familiar with it. A dark comedy horror title influenced by Scrubs doesn't sound like a terrible idea, but it does for Silent Hill. In under a year with no extra budget, the UK branch of Climax Studios cobbled something together. They realized the initial story and idea were bad. They didn't want to release the first bad Silent Hill title. Writer Sam Barlow rewrote the story in a week. Storyboarding had only a week of work due to scheduling of motion capturing. The FMVs at the beginning and the end of the game come from earlier story ideas from the other team and had to be put there per Konami's orders. Right off the bat, issues arise with Origins. We start with a cutscene of our protagonist, truck driver Travis Grady. Travis stops a truck in haste due to a hooded figure on the road. This hooded figure, it's Dr. Kaufman. This was an FMV that was a holdover from the previous iteration. In the opening credits, we have a certain individual listed who is controversial in Silent Hill fandom. Yes, we'll cover Tomm Hulett in this video, but that's for later. Alessa makes an appearance. Travis leaves his truck to follow her. Once we start playing, things look up, and then the game shoots itself right in the foot. Composer Akira Yamaoka returns. His musical landscapes are as fantastic as ever. Walking into town, a fantastic track, ORT plays. Vocals are from Mary Elizabeth McGlynn.
Does the darkness know your name?
But they didn't pace it out. Walk far enough and the game cuts it off and we jump to a cutscene. It's jarring to say the least.
Dad, do you know what you've done?
Ever played Red Dead Redemption? If you have, I'm sure the moment when the song Far Away kicks in when you enter Mexico is a game highlight. It's one of the best uses of a song I've come across in a game. Imagine how jarring it would be if a cutscene got in the way. Yes, the song stops if you get off your horse or have an unfortunate encounter with wildlife. But for many, they were able to enjoy the song in full before moving on. I'm not saying the intro and Origins would have been an all-timer moment in the series if the song played out in full, but would have softened the blow of what was to come next. We come across the house where the ritual takes place with Alessa. Dahlia's standing out there like some prankster. She's like Bart Simpson looking at his handiwork of setting something on fire. This moment and the contradictions of the first game are an absolute mess to sort through, so I'm going to try my best. In the first Silent Hill, there's a note about the house fire. The fire happened in the basement where Alessa was. In Origins, she's on the second floor. In the note from the first game, it says the blaze was the result of a malfunctioning boiler. It's thought this was a byproduct of the ritual. With the events of Origins and other sources, the fire is part of the ritual. In Silent Hill 3, there's a note from Harry saying Alessa was burned by her mother Dahlia. There's a note in Origins with a paragraph crossed out, with an addition of the boiler causing the fire. This is to cover up the cult's doing. What makes things even more confusing is that the note of the boiler in the first game doesn't always appear. From what I understand, it's only in the European and Japanese versions, and even then it doesn't always appear. To say it's a giant mess is an understatement. There's been much fan debate over the years on said topic. That said, I do find it to be one of the lesser issues with what we encounter here. Alessa and the other world are much larger issues. First, Alessa is able to project herself here. This is something she was not able to do until the beginning of Silent Hill 1 when Cheryl returns to town.
Are you making this happen? Are you doing this? Wait. No. Don't go.
Same with the other world. This came about when Alessa and Cheryl reunited in Silent Hill 1. So why can we access the other world now? As Travis, we can move into the other world at will. His locked up mother talked about people in mirrors. So was there another world before Alessa? There was never a suggestion that the other world did exist before her. My brain hurts thinking about all this. Other issues include the characterization of past characters. For Lisa here, it's okay, since who she was in Silent Hill 1 was how Alessa saw her, a manifestation of her. Kaufman and Dahlia, those are much larger issues. For Dahlia, there's not a huge gap in between the two titles, about 7 years or so, yet you'd think it'd been decades due to her change in appearance. This is what happens when you make a prequel to a story with many different interpretations, and you only have a week to write it out. Looking back, the team said it was a mistake in making a prequel to the first Silent Hill. As a main character, Travis is okay, but nothing special. Well, at least what the game explores about him. It's amusing they used Norman Reedus as an inspiration for his face, considering Norman's role in the series' future. There are hints that there's something more about him. His mother tried to kill him because the mirrors told him he was the devil child. His father took his own life shortly afterwards. Something is off with the way he acts. Sure, you could say that about everyone in Silent Hill, but here, there are many hints that he's a serial killer, something that the bad ending implies when we kill too many.
What are you talking about? Not your mama! Please! No!
Excuse me, sir. Hotel's closed for the season. Wait. What are you doing, son? Daddy!
Origins has this awkward focus of setting up the events of Silent Hill 1 and dealing with Travis. They should have only focused on one or the other. There's something interesting here if they pursued the idea of him being a serial killer, something he could come to terms with, turn himself in. Remember, this is before the series had run the Silent Hill 2 approach into the ground, its characters and how the game used Silent Hill as a way to address their demons. If they had to remain a prequel, they could have picked a different time frame. What if Travis came into town when Alessa was growing up before the ritual, or before she was even born? They could have explored elements of the Order. There was plenty to explore there. Save for one conversation, Origins doesn't manage to capture that dreamlike Twin Peaks style of dialogue. The conversation where Lisa talks about being a movie star, which I started this section with, was the only one I really felt that in. It reminds me of a couple scenes from David Lynch's Mulholland Drive with its context, which doesn't hurt.
Before I kill you, then they put you in jail. Then I cry, and then I say with big emotion, I hate you! I hate us both! Such a lame scene.
Combat in Origins received tweaking. Origins makes use of breakable weapons. Yes, Silent Hill 4 made use of it. Here, it's taken to comical levels. Weapon durability is a controversial mechanic in games. Many games will receive fan fixes to deal with it. I can see what developers are going for. Of all the mechanics that can use to create tension, weapon durability is a tough one to pull off. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a game that really benefits from weapon durability. As a result, there's a comical amount of weapons lying around. Anything that isn't bolted down is fair game. This leads to ridiculous moments of tossing typewriters or toasters at enemies. It's not like there's an increase in emphasis on combat. Like prior titles, you're better off just running past enemies. What makes this weapon system more amusing is that they don't stack up on one another. You cycle through them in the order you pick them up. You could do this in real time or in the menu. I could see what they're going for here. Find something, anything in your environment to use against enemies. That's fine. The issue is how easy weapons break and how much is lying around. There was one bit where I collected a whole bunch of pool cues. It felt like a gag out of a sketch show. Enemy designs are passable, better than what's to come with future titles. For having such a high bar of what came before, they did a good job, for the most part. Some are retreads of past titles. Some enemies are rather annoying and you can end up in a stun lock with some of their attacks. I found the floating harnesses goofier and more frustrating than scary. Though props to the design of the E2 back that appears at the motel. I really like this design in Monster. There's also the Butcher, this game's equivalent to Pyramid Head. Nothing remarkable about this monster. You could tell it was a mandate by higher-ups for commercial viability. Remove him from the game and there's no major loss. Switching between the real world and otherworld through mirrors is an interesting idea, gameplay-wise. I do like how progression changes as a result, how you have to traverse to the other side and then come back to unlock an area. Navigation-wise, this was quite satisfying. This comes at the expense of the lore and the horror. What made the Otherworld such a terrifying place was how we had no control over it. Here, it's only a mirror away. We have control over when we want to go or leave the Otherworld. Giving us control, although allowing for more gameplay options, decreases the atmosphere and horror. It's a trade-off. For a title where atmosphere and horror are central, it's the wrong one. Although props to them for trying something different, even if it didn't land. It's something this series wouldn't try again. Even with the compromise to the atmosphere, it's not a huge drop. Origins still does a good job of keeping it intact. Much better than the future titles. The areas are well laid out and thought out with the mirror switching mechanic. As memorable as prior titles? No, but it's not a huge drop in quality. For a short time frame they had for development, the end result are quality layouts that aren't a chore to get through. The puzzles are decent, although not as good as past puzzles. For the most part, they're straightforward. Some make use of finding the solution elsewhere, memorize it or write it down, and then use it on the puzzle itself. The use of switching back and forth with the mirrors creates more puzzle elements in regards to navigation. As I said earlier, it's a mechanic that's well done, even if it does take away from the horror and atmosphere. While it has a flimsy setup of going there, the sanitarium was a well done section. Beyond the hospital, which I found uninspired, the areas are all enjoyable. The sanitarium is an obvious location for building dread and tension. It makes good use of the mirror mechanic to progress forward. What's lacking are the enemies, as those annoying harnesses are around. Of course, these soundscapes of Akira Yamaoka are as inspired as ever and do a lot of heavy lifting. The oppressing atmosphere is in full swing. The fight against Travis's mother at the end is well done. As mentioned earlier, the decision of juggling setting up the events for Silent Hill 1 and Travis were ill-advised.
I'm not dead. Locked away. Out of sight, out of mind, not dead. I asked them to bring my boy to me.
Mama.
Come here, boy. Let Mama take a look at you.
The theater is another well-structured area. I have to note these annoying enemies hanging from the roof. Evasion can be quite annoying. Getting locked into QTEs to escape was frustrating. More elements of Shakespeare return here with The Tempest. Thank God we don't have to do a book sorting puzzle like the one in Silent Hill 3 involving Shakespeare.
Beseech you, Father.
Hence, hang not on my garments.
Sir, have pity. I'll be his shorty.
Silence! One word more shall make me chide thee, if not hate thee. What? An advocate for an impossible... Hush!
I got a nice chuckle of Alessa kicking the dead boss at the end of this section. Nice callback to the connection with Heather. Riverside Motel is our last place for exploration before the end stretch. The oppressive atmosphere is well done and gets closest to the feelings of the titles of old. I love the use of an item that we've had with us since the beginning of the game to help solve a puzzle. I enjoyed the build up to unlocking room 500. It's established early on that something significant happened here. Everything about this section is building up to being able to finally access it, not unlike Silent Hill 2 with the hotel room. As a child, shortly after his mother went insane, Travis and his father stayed at this motel. His father hung himself not long afterwards.
Wake up. Please, Daddy.
I'm not sleeping, son.
Daddy.
You knew I wasn't sleeping. Why did you stand there for so long? It wasn't right.
Please, Daddy.
It wasn't healthy, son.
Daddy, this is insane.
Time you faced up to what happened.
It's not meant to be a huge plot twist or a revelation, and that's fine. The game gave us this information prior to. It's more of a, oh, now Travis is going to come to terms with what happened. This would be a good ending point for the game, if Origins was only focused on the story of Travis. However, there are the lingering plot threads of Alessa. There is another major issue with the plot of Origins, and that being the Flaros. Here it's used to restore her powers. Compare that to the first Silent Hill where it's used to capture her.
Come out! I've got your thing for you! Happy? You've dug up my parents, what now? When do we get to look inside your sick little mind?
There's this goofy cutscene with her where she's acting more like Alma from Fear. And then there's another cutscene with hooded figures around her corpse with Dr. Kaufman present. This is another one of those holdovers and creates a whole further muck of plot issues. In the good ending, it sets up events for the first Silent Hill with baby Cheryl and luring her back to Silent Hill. All things considered, Origins does have several issues, yet it does an admirable job of capturing the spirit of the previous titles. Considering this is a team that saw their writings on the wall, started from scratch, and came up with the final product in such a short time is something to commend. They could learn from their mistakes and try again, this time with more development time. They would get a chance, but it would be a title very different from the norm for the series. Other studios would get a crack at Silent Hill. How were those attempts? Well, let's take a look. Spoiler alert, not as good. When you start a new game in Homecoming, the first thing you do when you gain control of Alex is a QTE. This sets the standard of what to expect with Silent Hill Homecoming. To me, it's the worst of the Silent Hill games. It has its moments, but those are few and far between. It's a design by committee kind of game. It suffered from a case of higher-ups mandating, make it like the movie, we want that audience. Downpour is also a lousy game, but not to the extent that Homecoming is. If you want to play Homecoming, and I'm not sure why you would want to, the PC fan patch from Unknown Project is essential. 2008, the year Homecoming was released, was the heyday of lackluster PC ports. It cleans up a number of issues. It removes the QTEs, making them an automatic success. Even then, the game would crash at points during load screens. The best solution I found was to reduce the resolution from 1920 by 1080. Hence, most of my footage has black bars. For each loading screen, I would wait in anticipation of a crash. Save points are spread out, so there were cases of annoyance when it would crash. Even with the patch, some areas would turn to a crawl FPS-wise, like the sewers. I have to commend putting the time to patch a game like Homecoming. This isn't some diamond in the rough like Vampire Bloodlines that just need some further patching. Double Helix was the developers of Silent Hill Homecoming. This company was a merger of The Collective and Shiny Entertainment. The Collective worked on a number of licensed games. Shiny Entertainment? Now that's more like it. I love their games. Earthworm Jim, MDK, great stuff. They made quirky games that thought outside the box. Perhaps they could bring some of that thinking to Silent Hill? Well, that wouldn't really be the case. Double Helix landed the gig due to a pitch they sent to Konami for Silent Hill 5, which it was known at the time. With the financial success of the 2006 Silent Hill film, Konami and producers wanted the game to take elements from it. They wanted monsters from the film, the transition appearance of the otherworld. course, Pyramid Head. They want to grab that movie audience. Remember, save for the first Silent Hill, the games have never been huge sellers, especially when you compare sales numbers to the Resident Evil series. The first appearance of Pyramid Head in Homecoming is comical. Whoever thought it was a great idea to bring him back was probably creaming themselves over it. I'm sure they expected players to react like the guy who creamed himself over the Disney Star Wars trailers.
I clapped when I saw it!
Pyramid shows up less than a handful of times. Earlier versions had several more appearances. The higher-ups pushing for it would leave the project before completion, and the team decide to cut back on his appearances. Pyramid Head adds nothing here. For a good reason, his appearance makes no sense outside of Silent Hill 2. But hey, he more or less became the mascot of Silent Hill and the movie was a hit. Being the first Silent Hill title on the 7th generation of hardware, budgets were growing at a rapid rate. Even with more powerful hardware, Homecoming is clunky in its appearance. The environments and enemies are fine, it's the character faces and animations that are off. They're lifeless and feel dated for its time. Compare that to Silent Hill 3, which came out 5 years prior to Homecoming. Considering how many human characters there are here, it sticks out like a sore thumb. We saw plenty of games like Homecoming during the 7th generation. The ones that attempted to reach a wider audience only to end up falling flat. Older fans reacted with disappointment, and they weren't able to bring in enough new fans to meet sales expectations. When you try to please a wider audience, there's a greater chance of pleasing nobody. Homecoming is very much one of those titles. In regards to pleasing nobody, I don't think you'll find anyone saying the gameplay changes were an improvement. Combat is an awkward affair in Homecoming. In the vertical slice pitch, Konami told Double Helix to cut back on combat elements. It leaned more towards Resident Evil 4 in its earlier stages. The end result is a system that's somewhere in between the classic style and something action-heavy. And when you try to take elements of both, you end up with heavy compromises. More often than not, the decision doesn't work. That's exactly the case here. Homecoming shifts to the over-the-shoulder camera perspective. This is something that was planned in the earlier version of Silent Hill Origins. At least there are no breakable weapons here. For melee attacks, we can use a light attack for combos, a heavy attack, dodging, and counterattacks. One-on-one, the system works okay. Attacks are well telegraphed with sound cues from enemies, yet enemies take too long to go down. There is merit to giving enemies more life in survival horror titles, but I found the enemies here just had a bit too much. Of course you can shoot them, but you really want to save your bullets. Dealing with more than one enemy, it's a nightmare with locking onto enemies. You have to enter into combat mode, which I found awkward. I found switching from a gun to another weapon a messy affair and took damage several times as a result, which should have been easy dodges. Dodging can be, well, dodgy at points where it seemed like I would dodge and instead would get hit. It's easy to get caught in a stun lock from an enemy as a result. Of course, you can run away from enemies, but it's more difficult than prior titles. Enemies move with greater speed. It's easy to get stuck with a few surrounding you. Getting out requires killing them or rolling your way by. On the survival horror side, it loses the horror elements. It doesn't have that haphazard feel, run or fight. On the action side, it's a clunky system, and not in the good way. Even up until the end of the game, I was fighting with the clunky control system. There'd be times of ambiguity of whether my dodges would or would not succeed. It's a combat system that feels like it went through many iterations that could not be settled upon. How are the enemies? They're a mixed bag. Some are pulled directly from the 2006 film. Some feel more of a case of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, instead of fitting in with the story. Human enemies show up, something that should never happen in a Silent Hill title. Although this did lead to my only real scare I had in my time with Homecoming. As they're human, they don't set off the radio. I was in a room with loud machinery reading something on the wall when they snuck up on me. Do you know what also takes away from the horror of combat? Telling us during loading screens what we could do to take them down, specific enemies. Let the player figure that out on their own. I'm fine if you give tips about counterattacks or getting up when knocked down, but giving hints on specific enemies, those weren't needed. Now there are a few moments of greatness within Homecoming. The boss fights are well done, and one stands out as a game highlight, that being the fight with Scarlet, the doll. Her design is unique yet effective. Her animations are fluid. The environment of the combat is great. There's a nice rhythm and pattern to her attacks. What makes it such a memorable encounter is the music. Akira Yamamoto returns once again as the composer. I don't find it as strong overall as his other works, but it's still excellent. Granted, it's also a game I consider the worst in the series. But this track during the Scarlet fight is a standout not just for the game, but the series itself. It starts with a minimal, haunting vocal track. As we progress further into the fight, more layers start to kick in and gets more intense. It's an excellent case of music making experience that much better. Exploration receives some tweaking. In navigating the town of Shepherd's Glen, we do have sections of backtracking. I did appreciate the game opening up shortcuts and rewarding you for paying attention during these, such as having the axe to now cut a barrier of what was once inaccessible for a weapon upgrade. Otherwise, they are linear fares with nothing really of note. Indoor locations are more linear than past titles. Even switching to the other world, there's little addition to areas of what we just explored. The section prior to the Scarlet Doll boss fight has a quality atmosphere, but ends up being a single linear path instead of branching off. At one point in development, Pyramid Head would chase us through this section. Thank goodness he was cut. In regards to puzzles, there's nothing to write home about beyond a couple. There's some wire crossing puzzles, the survival horror classic sliding piece puzzle. The single puzzle to stand out to me was the final puzzle prior to the final boss of lining up the symbols with the correct family. It felt something more of a point-and-click game, without the wonky point-and-click game logic. Let's shift to the story of Homecoming. We are playing as Alex Shepard, a soldier returning home to Shepherd's Glen, a town nearby Silent Hill. He's getting a ride in from Travis Grady in what feels like an unneeded nod to Origins.
Bad dream?
Things have gone awry in his time away. It's now engulfed in fog. Many people have disappeared. He goes off to search for his younger brother, Josh. Alex's personality boils down to, where is Josh?
Where is everybody? Where's Josh? Yeah, well, I'm not here for long. I'm looking for my brother. You seen him? Look, what I really need is some information. Have you seen my brother Joshua? I'm just trying to find my brother, okay?
Sure, James in Silent Hill 2 had a focus on Mary, but there was more to him than just that. Do you know what would help me empathize with Alex more? If he wasn't a doppelganger of Nick Lashley, a man who was once married to Jessica Simpson in her prime. In earlier versions, Nolan North was going to be the voice of Alex. Now, the voice of Alex is nothing special, but thank goodness Nolan North didn't get the role. He's talented at his craft, especially when he plays against character, but he would be out of place here with his normal voice.
Josh, is that you? This must be a little girl's room. It looks like something was taken from here. Too fast. Have to get the speed just right. I'm doing it wrong. I got a bad feeling down here.
It'd be like putting Troy Baker in Silent Hill. Oh, wait, that did happen.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
Speaking of doppelgangers, Alex's dad looks exactly like John Locke from Lost. He dresses the same as well. There's clear influence in the concept art. Being a fan of Lost, I now wonder how John Locke would handle being in Silent Hill. The appearances of wheelchairs would be fitting for him. Do you know those channels like Petronax and Eli Handel B? The ones that superimpose a TV or movie character into a game? Here's an idea for them. Put one of John Locke in Silent Hill. Or how about Polly from The Sopranos in Silent Hill? One of my favorite green texts is Polly in Silent Hill. Oh yeah, back to Homecoming, this mediocre game. Anyways, I appreciate that for Alex, speaking in game is a rarity. The game uses text prompts. There are stretches where Alex will accompany another character. It's weird to play a game that's somewhat modern and not have constant banter between the two, where the other tells you what to do in combat or how to solve a puzzle. This is prior to when it really started to become an annoying design trend. It's something that spiraled out of control over the last few years. Something that is now getting a lot of pushback and attention as of writing, thank goodness.
You can probably use those islands to get a better angle on the torch, no?
Bro, can you... Oh my god. Like, can I experiment a bit? Hello?
Interesting fact about one of these characters, that being Elle. Early plans were for her to end up being a grown-up Laura from Silent Hill 2. Thank God that was scrapped. There's also Wheeler, the cop who gives us a hand. While the game's writing is nothing to write home, or homecoming about, this one line from him got a chuckle out of me. There are too many human characters in Homecoming. It takes away from the isolated atmosphere. Seems like every other minute we are stumbling into someone else. Homecoming introduces a dialogue choice system. Talk about unnecessary. This isn't an RPG, it ruins the flow of conversations. You know, in prior titles, conversations would be a nice reward to look forward to for progression, the quality writing, the intrigue.
Monsters? They look like monsters to you? Oh no. Don't worry. It's just a joke.
That's non-existent here. Origins suffers from this as well, but it's far more egregious here. It never gets close to that Silent Hill feeling. Case in point, the scene where we must decide if Alex will kill his mother. Giving the choice for the player to kill their own mother? This should be a huge moment with great impact. Homecoming's writing didn't put the legwork in to make this moment work. To make it worse, this is done as a dialogue choice. Why not make this choice through gameplay? Either the player will shoot her or walk away. Another frustration of the story for Homecoming is the direction it takes. Having our protagonist, a soldier returning home, is a great idea to run with. Think of the possibilities. Alex could be dealing with PTSD and have the town Silent Hill incorporate his time in war into how it projects itself to him. Early ideas include a cut war zone section of Alex in the other world. I would have loved to see how that would have looked. So where does the story go? It turns out Alex never went to war. The hospital he was in at the beginning, it was a mental hospital.
Alex, you've been in the hospital. I know. I was wounded in battle. No. A mental hospital.
Josh is dead, died by Alex's hand in an accident. It reeks of being a plot twist for the sake of one, an attempt in recreating the one from Silent Hill 2. The revelation lands with a wet fart. What should be a massive revelation flops around like a fish out of water. Speaking of water, Josh's death on the boat with Alex is borderline comedic in how it plays out.
No!
What a piece of crap.
It's not. It's worth more than $1 million. That's why Dad gave it to me. Give that back! Give that back! Come on!
Josh!
Another issue with the plot of Homecoming involves the cult in Shepherd's Glen. I don't know why they didn't just set the entire game in Silent Hill. Shepherd's Glen is more or less the same in its appearance. Why not just have it all in one location? The four foundings of Shepherd's Glen left Silent Hill to get away from the Order. Every 50 years, they have to sacrifice one of their children for protection, Alex being part of that lineage and the choice for a sacrifice. As he was not killed, the town has no protection, hence the fog and the monsters. What doesn't sit right with me here is how that turns Silent Hill into a weapon. It clashes with the idea of the otherworld and the town from prior games, which makes setting part of the game in Shepherd's Glen a puzzling choice. Why not just have them live in Silent Hill, left the Order, and made a pact years ago? The idea of having to sacrifice one of your children to the Order is a dark and twisted idea to run with. There are brief moments where the game explores Alex being the neglected child of the family compared to Josh. This is a direction they could have leaned more into. Imagine if Alex was called back from the war, having to deal with what the town projects to him and being chosen as the sacrifice. Or what if he played as his father Adam, with the game building up to choosing which of his sons to sacrifice or trying to find a way out of it. There are interesting foundations that Homecoming has in regards to its stories, yet the story built upon it takes the lamest route possible. It feels like higher-ups want another twist like Silent Hill 2 because players loved it. The end result is an eye roller that misses the mark. What makes things even worse is the lack of subtlety in the story. The scene with Judge Holloway explaining the Order and the sacrifice in a matter-of-fact way is one of the worst in the series. The series has always kept things up to interpretation or kept things vague. Here it's right on the nose. There is some unintentional hilarity during the scene where items are highlighted in the background.
Our God was broken. Your father's lack of conviction cursed us all.
Now, Origins had a number of issues due to being tied into Silent Hill 1. Homecoming suffers from being a design by committee title where they want to capitalize on the popularity of the movie. As a result, Homecoming ends up being the most removed from what Silent Hill is as a series. There is foundation for a good game here, but instead of letting it stand on its own, it had to stand on the shoulders of the movie and Silent Hill 2. To me, it's the worst in the series. This would be Double Helix's sole contribution to Silent Hill, a large-budget, next-generation Silent Hill title that missed the mark. The same thing would happen to Downpour, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take a look at a unique entry in the Silent Hill catalog, and the best of the Western titles.
Don't worry. Head wounds always bleed a lot. Lots of blood vessels close to the surface. It's nothing serious. I can clean up back at my place.
Lisa, I'm Harry.
Harry Houdini. Sorry. I'm always saying goofy things that come into my head.
Not only is Shattered Memories a unique Silent Hill title, but it's also a unique title in the overall landscape of gaming. There's nothing quite like it, even till this day. Some elements from Shattered Memories have appeared elsewhere, but not the complete package. Built for the Nintendo Wii, it's one of those games that only could have came out in the way it did with the Wii in mind. Sure, that does include some of the motion control trappings that we came to expect of the Wii. Say what you will about the Wii, positive or negative, but it got developers to think outside the box. Shattered Memories is one of the best examples of it. It's one of the first mainstream horror titles with no combat. Instead, we could only run from the enemy. Amnesia: The Dark Descent, which took the gaming world by storm, was still a year away. There are elements of the walking simulator in Shattered Memories, a few years prior to the rise of that genre. It also beat Press X to Jason with Press A to Cheryl by a few months.
Cheryl? Cheryl! Cheryl! Cheryl? Jason! Jason! Jason!
It was also ahead of the curve of the constant barrage of remakes we get these days, something the Silent Hill series is partaking in at the moment. Well, a remake isn't the right term, a reimagining of the first Silent Hill. It works as a standalone title if you've never played the first title. If you have played Silent Hill, it takes your knowledge of it and twists it around, it toys with you, and it builds up to one of the more emotional, moving narratives in the game. Climax Studios, the studio that worked on Silent Hill Origins, developed Shattered Memories. Sam Barlow would return as the writer. If that name does sound familiar, he has found success in the indie realm with titles like Her Story. It went through a few iterations, eventually turning into a reimagining of the first Silent Hill. This helped Climax get the green light from Konami and allowed for experimentation with an idea they had. A feature that still remains unique in the landscape of gaming, one that I'd love to see other titles take a crack at.
I want you to know this will be different. We take this at your pace. No notes, no drugs, no theories. We go back to the start. Understand what happened.
That standout feature of Shattered Memories is the psych profile. Throughout our playthrough, we will partake in therapy sessions. I will note this guy seems like a bit of a loose cannon. Drinking during sessions, getting angry, seems a bit unprofessional.
Scraps of a happy life that never was, scraps of a father who never existed. Wake up!
We'll answer questions during our sessions that will shape our psych profile. This will change a number of factors in our journey through Silent Hill as Harry Mason. The way characters dress, the way they interact with us, text messages we receive, voice messages we can listen to. Another element that impacts your psych profile is what Harry looks at in our journey. Focus on something notable for a time and Harry will make a comment.
No bareback in the great outdoors? I learn something new every day. Nice. Mine switched off 1,000,000 years ago. Hey.
The game plays you as much as you play it. The major beats of the plot remain the same. It's the in-between sections that change depending on your psych profile. For a series known for replayability, Shattered Memories takes a different approach to it. There's nothing quite like the psych profile in other games. How a game plays out depending on decisions of the player is tough to pull off. Look within Western Silent Hill titles and you can see where this idea goes wrong. Key moments in Silent Hill Homecoming and Downpour that impact the ending come down to binary choices. Press A or B. Other games give the illusion of choice that when you look through the curtain turn out to be disappointing. Telltale struck gold with The Walking Dead, but found diminishing returns when they didn't tweak their formula of decision making. The number of small variations in Shattered Memories adds up. Most games tend to do the make a big decision at a couple of key points. This was a common marketing bullet point at the time of Shattered Memories' release. I wish more games would take the approach done here. Make small tweaks to add up to a unique experience depending on how you play. The destination may mostly be the same, but the journey will be different. Smaller forks in the road with more frequency instead of larger forks with less frequency. Of course, this is a difficult development task. Shattered Memories has a short runtime, even for a Silent Hill title. As a result of this focus, other elements of Shattered Memories didn't receive as much attention. Another unique feature of Shattered Memories were the chase sequences. The game eschews combat for chase sequences. There are no ways to kill the enemies pursuing us, we can only toss them off if they catch us. The fact that you can't fight enemies but only run was a sticking point in development. This is still a year before Amnesia: The Dark Descent came out, before this really started to become a thing. We shift to an otherworld that's different from the cold industrial otherworld of old. Instead, it is cold in the literal sense, a world of ice. This is where the monsters will chase us. Their appearance differs depending on our psych profile. They are the only enemies we encounter in Shattered Memories, and their design is nothing to write home about. The studio did a decent job with the monster design in Origins. It's a step back here in Shattered Memories. Granted, it's not the focus of the game. The chases work well at first, although they lose their luster before the game ends, which is disappointing as it's not a long title. We don't have much time to investigate these areas in the otherworld in peace, something that's a bit of a missed opportunity. Later chases will split off into multiple paths. We may find ourselves revisiting past hallways, now try a different door this time. It becomes a trial and error affair and can become tedious. You could also hide, but the game does nothing to incentivize it. You're better off just making a run for it and shaking enemies off if need be. It's too bad the game didn't structure chases to make use of hiding. As the chases lose their luster prior to the game's end, they would have been a welcome addition. It would have been a way to introduce new enemies into the fold. Perhaps a different type of enemy that would outrun us, but would give up if they couldn't find us. There's not a lot going on in these chase scenes, in the sense that they're easy to follow. I discussed this in my video on Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth. There's a notable chase scene in that game. Even those who haven't played Dark Corners may know of it. There are no major explosions or collapsing buildings as we hold forward. You have to have precise design to guide the player in chase scenes. We're navigating through these rooms at great speed. You want tension, but you don't want frustration. Shattered Memories achieves this for the most part. Enemies are easy to toss off. You can knock over objects to serve as barriers to buy time. You could use a flare to keep enemies at bay for a time. If you die, it's a short trip back to where you were prior. There is no major penalty for death. Many horror titles now offer the option to hide and run from enemies as a core gameplay mechanic. The chase and the hide mechanic of Shattered Memories is okay, but it falls short of what the game is able to achieve with the psych profile mechanic. It's one of those mechanics that I'm guessing came about due to having to think outside the box with the Wii. Speaking of the Wii, Shattered Memories has many of those Wii trappings in how you interact with the environment, novelties that turned into eye rollers over time. Harry's cell phone is a key component of gameplay. I had some chuckles calling various phone numbers you could find in the environment.
Hi, you've reached How Am I Driving? To report incidents of drivers sleeping at the wheel, driving too slowly, or dangerous lane behavior, please state the highway on which the incident occurred.
Static trails lead to messages and conversations. These change depending on your psych profile, events that happened elsewhere at a different time. Puzzles are clever in Shattered Memories, not in the sense of how they're thought out, but how we make use of our phone or the environment around us. One great example is the puzzle where you place the objects in the correct position to obtain a phone number to open a door. One involves us searching through an environment to discover a password. It's not a matter of finding that information and replicating it. Another includes deciphering the right number to call for a song request on the radio. They're less about the eureka moments that the Team Silent Hill titles would have in their puzzles. Instead, they're palette cleansers in between chase sequences. Shattered Memories has a different take to its atmosphere. It lacks the oppressive atmosphere like the titles of old. This is not due to them missing the mark. Instead, it's with the approach they took. As a reimagining of the first Silent Hill, it removes a great number of elements. The Order, Alessa, Shattered Memories does not incorporate them. You would think this would be a red flag, but it's not. Shattered Memories leans heavily into that David Lynch Twin Peaks feel, something that's been present throughout the series. In Shattered Memories, the atmosphere is more dreamlike. There's an uneasy feeling in the air, that something is off about what's going on. The horror is more or less stripped away to focus on these elements, and the game nails it. The best example of this is with Michelle, a young woman attending her high school reunion with no one present due to the snow. When we walk into the gym, she sings a rendition of Always on My Mind. Of course, depending on your psych profile, her appearance and personality will change. They even went the extra mile with having a different rendition of Always on My Mind depending on your psych profile.
I just never took the time. You're always on my mind. You're always on my mind.
It feels straight out of Twin Peaks, and Always on My Mind is a great song choice. Although I'm more of a Willie Nelson fan myself for versions of the song. On the note of music, Shattered Memories would serve as Akira Yamaoka's last work on the series, until the recent announcement of his return for the Silent Hill 2 remake. It's a more subdued approach and fits with the tone of Shattered Memories. It does a great job of evoking that Twin Peaks vibe. While I have upscaled the resolution with the Dolphin emulator, Shattered Memories is one of the better looking titles on the Wii. The facial animations are fantastic and still hold up. Team Silent were absolute wizards in regards to getting the most out of the hardware they were working with. Climax Studios themselves did a great job of getting as much out of the Wii as possible. Shattered Memories uses the first Silent Hill as a foundation for its story, but from there builds a very different narrative. In this version, Harry and Cheryl live in Silent Hill. In his journey for seeking out Cheryl, a number of inconsistencies add up. Why is there a family living in Harry's house? Has the car accident messed up his mind, his memories?
No, Lucy, this man here's just a little confused. This is my house!
Well, I don't see how that can be the case.
We've been here nearly 14 years. Sure you got the right address?
Who was that? That was our daughter, Katie. You're in a bad way, son, getting yourself all worked up.
We'll come across familiar faces, like Sybil. While still a cop, she's older here and a cop of Silent Hill, not Brahms. Depending on your psych profile, her appearance and attitude will change. She can be a kind, caring officer, or cold with provocative attire.
Harry Mason. This is the right address. You know what? This doesn't add up. I'm gonna need you to come down to the station with me. We can sort it out there.
That road's not in my jurisdiction.
What?
You want state police.
You're kidding. My daughter is out there. You have to find her.
A lot of people need help tonight. Look around. The whole town is a mess.
Michelle is a new character introduced to this world, and some of the game's best moments are between her and Harry.
Catch. Thanks. A gang of kids in my class used to hack it to change their grades.
And you?
Hey, I didn't need to cheat. Good thing we're closed.
How so?
Not sure they'd let you in with that outfit.
I'm the best dressed writer I know.
That's why I'm dating a lawyer.
She's kind, likable, and helping Harry find Cheryl. Yet she knew a Cheryl Mason that went to her high school.
How many Cheryl Masons could there be in a small town like this? She even looks like you.
There is a resemblance, but my Cheryl's just a kid.
Yet you could tell that she's in a relationship that's on choppy waters. This results in the awkward car ride between her and her boyfriend with Harry in the back seat.
Talk about our relationship?
Michelle, there is no relationship.
Please, don't do this. Not now.
If not now, when? Where? Christ, Michelle, I've been trying to do this for months, but you don't want to hear it. Now we have a witness, maybe you'll listen.
You're just tired. No, you're not thinking right. It's been too long since we've been together.
While she doesn't get a ton of screen time, the stretch with Lisa's a lot of fun with her upbeat, goofy attitude. There's an amusing situation that could play out in her apartment if Harry decides to take a peek.
During the heat wave. Now it's winter. Freaky early, but still. Time flies.
Where things get out there is with Dahlia. In this reimagining, she's an ex-wife of Harry, with a very different appearance and personality, which again varies depending on her psych profile. She's voiced by Laura Bailey, who I could listen to talk dirty all day.
Are you on something? I'm Dahlia. Hottest piece of ass you'll ever see in this town. You are Harry Mason. Generally, a fun guy to be with. You really don't know who I am.
No.
Sid and Nancy?
Who are Sid and Nancy?
My tits? You named them?
All these inconsistencies and odd situations keep building upon one another. Our end goal is to reach the lighthouse in the distance. There's no final boss or anything like that along the way. It uses the monsters as a narrative element as we get closer and closer to the truth, the revelation of what's happening here. Now, I have played Shattered Memories in the past but never beat it, although I was aware of the ending. Even with that knowledge, it still hits like a ton of bricks. The lighthouse? It's a clinic. What's been
You've been with me for so long.
I always will be.
Everything clicks into place. It's Cheryl, not Harry in these sessions. Harry died 18 years ago in a car crash. All those mementos we could find, those phone messages and text messages we receive, they're all related back to Cheryl. Some direct, some not as direct from her past years. In dealing with her trauma, she made her father into a hero-like figure as a child, something she still holds on to. But at the end of the day, he's only a human being. He's not perfect. Depending on how you play, there are variations to the end. She comes to accept her past, resent her father, or still hold on to the hero fantasy of them. On top of that, there are 4 variations afterwards of Cheryl's memories of her father. During the credits, we'll receive notes from our therapist, who is Dr. Kaufman, about our personality. You can see elements of Silent Hill 2 here with the ending. While it didn't draw attention to it, the endings of Silent Hill 2 can vary depending on how you play. How much time you spend around Maria, looking at certain objects, if you keep yourself healed up, were factors that determine which endings you got. The ending where Cheryl chooses to hold on to her father as this hero bears resemblance to the ending where James holds on to Maria, and yet it doesn't feel like it's copying the Silent Hill 2 twist. Influence? Sure, but just an influence. It uses that foundation and goes in a different direction. What results is one of the most satisfying, moving narratives in the game, how all the pieces fall into place. It doesn't reach the level that Silent Hill 2 does, and granted, was going to top Mary's letter at the end. But if this ending doesn't make you feel anything, check your pulse, because I'm sure you have no heart. The end result is a title that stands out not only amongst the Silent Hill series, but games overall. Over a decade later, I haven't played another game like Shattered Memories. Some elements have popped up here and there, but nothing that ties all these elements together. It's by far the best Western Silent Hill title. While it skews various elements that the series is known for, it still shows an understanding of what the series is. A team that understands and respects the world of Silent Hill with their own unique stamp on it. Which makes it a shame that this would be Climax Studios' final crack at the series. While it had notable issues and a quick turnaround time to save it from disaster, Origins did show they had an idea of how to work with the IP. Shattered Memories built upon this. I would have loved to see Climax get a chance at a larger budget title. Origins was a PSP title. Shattered Memories was a Wii title with PS2 and PSP ports. What if they got the chance to work on a title with focus on the PS3 and 360? Of course, that would not be the case. The next title in the series, Silent Hill Downpour, came from another studio. With moving into talking about Downpour, let's take a short detour. Let's talk about someone who had a large role in its development. One I mentioned earlier, one Tomm Hulett.
How do you stick by your guns and say, nope, this is what we're doing, we're convinced this is right, stick with us and you'll see?
Well, I go in a room by myself and cry. And then I come out.
I couldn't do this video and not talk about Tomm Hulett, a man who received much blame for the drop in quality of the series during this time frame. Time heals all wounds. Over time, the blame shifted more towards Konami as opposed to Tomm. Tomm was the face you would see most interviews and the one engaging with the community. Putting a face to a name made him an easy target, a scapegoat. Looking back all these years later, is Tomm blameless or not? It's a bit of column A and column B. Most of the issues during this era of Silent Hill lie in decisions made by the higher-ups at Konami, farming out the franchises to Western studios, mostly unproven ones, pushing to grow their audience to the detriment of what made the series what it was. Of course, when you do that, it never works out well. Yet, there is some blood on Tomm's hands. His position gave him notable input into the games. However, that lies more in the later titles of the Western output. So let's take a look at his role in the series. He first started on Silent Hill Homecoming as a producer. He was not happy with the decision of including Pyramid Head and pushed back against it. He said he was moved over to work on Origins as a result as an associate producer. He had a minimal role in Origins development as he came in later in the project. He came back near the end of Homecoming's development when the previous producer left. His input was more on cleaning up some of the messes that were left behind. Again, not a ton of involvement. For Shattered Memories, he stepped in as producer when another left the project as he was a fan of its approach. His role was protecting the vision that Climax had from others and letting them make the game they wanted to make. Then there was the Silent Hill HD collection. Saying this project was a mess is the understatement of the century.
Someone at fucking Hijinks Studios thought it was necessary to change the fucking font to Comic Sans in the HD version. Yeah, cause
There are many videos on YouTube covering this catastrophe. A team working with incomplete source code, and legal issues with using the original voiceovers, nothing seemed to go right. Tomm was in charge of the new voiceovers and brought Mary Elizabeth McGlynn to be the voice director. On paper, that doesn't sound like the worst choice. She was a vocal presence in the series, literally. She has experience in being a voice director with games and anime dubs. She was the voice director for Shattered Memories. But the end result missed what made the original voiceovers work.
It doesn't matter who I am. I'm here for you, James.
There is a misconception that stems from the interviews with Mary that Tomm rewrote the script of the games. The context was he wrote out the timings for the new voiceovers. One of the early bosses on Downpour said nobody plays Silent Hill for the story, and suggested setting the game in Alaska. That boss would not be involved with the project for very long. For Downpour, Tomm was a senior associate producer and one of the 3 writers on Downpour, so here he had more input than past titles. For Book of Memories, he was the producer and sole writer. The mandate for Book of Memories to be a dungeon crawler came from higher-ups. Other producers he worked with on these projects include Devin Shatsky and Jeremy Airy. Save for Book of Memories, Devin Shatsky outranked Tomm. Jeremy Airy was higher up on the food chain as an executive producer on all titles save for Origins. Yet they never got the same amount of pushback. They were not the main face in interviews or on fan forums. Then there were the Twin Perfect Silent Hill videos. However you feel about them, they did give a lot of damning evidence of things Tomm said in interviews or on forum posts. Although to be fair, some of the quotes were taken out of context. There were a number of cases while working on the series where he seemed to suggest that he had control over things and would flip-flop after he was gone. After leaving Konami, it would boil down to, well, I wasn't in control, blame Konami for that, when discussing his past working there. Although hearing about other people's experiences with Konami, that does make sense. Perhaps he didn't want to piss off his bosses at Konami while working there. Perhaps Konami were more than happy to let him become a scapegoat. He didn't do himself any favors with the things he would say in interviews. Remember, this was before game developers were shooting themselves in the foot on the regular. It seems like every other week someone will tweet something stupid. Better remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. You fling shit out on the internet, expect some toss back your way. In the end, I feel he got more flack than he deserved. Yet he wasn't blameless about how these titles turned out, especially with the later titles like Downpour, which we'll dive into now.
You're listening to the DJ Rick Show on WLMN FM, where the tracks are tight and the sweet melodies flow on and on. It's always a perfect day with DJ Rick's your on-air friend to the end.
Downpour is the definition of a mediocre late 7th generation title. It's a meh kind of game, a giant shoulder shrug. Forgettable in every way. It drifts further away from the gameplay foundation of old and pulls more from trends at the time. If a game is bad, there's some fascination in dissecting it. For something that's middling, it's harder to pick apart, not as enjoyable. For the first couple of hours, I felt like I was sleepwalking my way through. I was thinking of other things I'd rather be doing. It did get better upon arriving in Silent Hill, but not a lot. But hey, I'll give it a fair shake. I had no prior experience with the title myself besides knowing about the plot. Playing as a convict? There are interesting directions you could go with that premise. However, it's similar to Homecoming in that it takes a lackluster direction. This time, Vatra Games were given the keys to the franchise. They were a new studio based out of the Czech Republic. They went under a few months after Downpour's release in March 2012. There isn't a ton of information on the studio compared to the other ones covered in this video. They had staff joined from 2K Czech, a studio that put out the Mafia titles. Looking through staff and lead or director positions on Moby games for Downpour, there wasn't much crossover with staff from the Mafia titles. Downplay does some course correction with gameplay mechanics that missed the mark in past titles. It's unfortunate that they would correct one aspect but add another problem, a step forward along with a step back. The weapon system receives some tweaks. Weapons can break, but not at the rate that they would in Origins. You can't carry a comical number of weapons. You could carry 2 guns, 1 gun and 1 melee, or 1 melee weapon. You were never far away from a weapon you could pick up in the environment. They dialed back on these silly weapons, no typewriters or TV sets here. It was a step in the right direction. A limited choice of weapons we can hold leans more into survival horror elements. It's hampered by a sloppy execution. Picking up or switching to a gun while holding a melee weapon will drop it. This can lead to awkward situations where you toss down a melee weapon when you didn't mean to. And speaking of tossing, I started off this video by tossing a fire axe into the void. If you're a fan of Super Best Friends Play, or at the time of the incident, 2 Best Friends Play, you know this moment. A legendary moment from their many playthroughs, back when Matt and Pat tolerated the presence of one another.
So yeah, keep going and there's a movie theater on your right.
Fuck!
Are you fucking
I honestly
serious?
didn't mean
Are
to
you
do
fucking
that.
serious?
I didn't mean to do that.
What button did you hit?
RT.
Even?
Fucking shite.
I guess you better look at that brick.
No.
Of course, I had to pay tribute in the same spot. However, when I arrived at the spot, there was not a fire axe in sight. I spent a good 20 minutes wandering the town to find a fire axe. Hey, it got me to explore the town at least. I stumbled into some side quests along the way. Once I found one, I made my way back and I screwed up the toss. I didn't aim high enough. It's a visual representation of my time with Downpour. I did find a smaller axe nearby though and got the toss right, although it didn't have the same impact. Combat moves more towards the survival horror territory after the action-heavy approach with Homecoming. A stripped-down system with basic strikes, blocks, and dodges. Running past monsters is an easier fare. Well, there is one exception to that being the Screamer. They'll scream, which stops you dead in your tracks for a few seconds. This attack has a wide range. They could also latch onto you when you turn your back to them when running away. They're one of the more annoying enemies I've come across in the game. What makes it worse is that Downpour throws a ton your way. On top of that, the monster designs are uninspired and generic. In doing research for this video, I came across a Reddit post from someone claiming to be the animation director at Vatra. When asked about the development, he said that Devin Shatsky and Tomm Hulett were strict about the monster design. The art team had constant opposition against the typical Silent Hill monster design. The animation director said concept artists left the project due to hundreds of refused pieces of concept art by the producers. Of course, this post cannot be verified, so take it with a grain of salt. If it's true, it's perplexing that they would end up going with such generic designs. This is what they decided on? It gets worse with the game's main monster, but hold that thought for now. It's nice to see the option of choosing puzzle difficulties is back. There are a few of these safe combination puzzles throughout Downpour that can prove to be a stumper for several minutes. They are optional, and the more enjoyable puzzles in the game. The ones on the critical path are nothing to write home about. Speaking of optional, there are side quests in Downpour while exploring Silent Hill. The town here has more of an open-ended approach. Some of the game's better moments happen during side quests. That isn't saying much, however. I find its inclusion to be misguided. If you're making a game that doesn't have a long runtime, focus on the critical path. This isn't some 40+ hour RPG. There is some well done environmental storytelling in these side quests, and the game doesn't spell it out to you to how to find them or complete them. Refreshing to see a game do that, especially from this time frame of 2012. This is the era where games really start to hold your hand every step of the way, with mini-maps or objective markers. There was one side quest in particular that stood out as a good representation of Downpour. Some decent moments are ruined by some puzzling design choices. One side quest has us rewinding the events of a murder. This had me intrigued and invested. And then they used the Howie scream. To say this took me out of the moment is an understatement. What should have been catharsis became comedic. It made me think of StarCraft and how I'd rather be playing that than Downpour. The Howie scream is a common use scream used in all sorts of media. I best associate it with the Terran Academy scream in StarCraft. Downpour has a rain mechanic. When it rains, enemies come out in greater numbers and they're more aggressive. On paper, it's not a bad idea. The execution is lacking. It's all too easy to dip inside a building and re-emerge, with the rain now gone. Downpour has a number of gameplay cliches that popped up during the 7th generation, like crossing a narrow board at an agonizing pace. What were the point of these? Were they hiding loading screens? The Otherworld in Downpour takes a prison-like appearance, which makes sense considering our protagonist Murphy is a convict. It's a step up from the Otherworld in Homecoming, but it's not a slam dunk by any stretch. Like Shattered Memories, there are chases within the Otherworld. Some glowing red light is chasing us. Ooh, spooky. These chases are nothing special. Not as enjoyable or well designed as the chases were in Shattered Memories. They suffer from the issue of too much going on, a spectacle over the chase itself. They also include sliding sections, something that was common in games at the time. It's odd to see the Callisto Protocol, which is being released shortly as of writing, is making use of them. Chases are a large part of the Otherworld, but not the only part. There are some brief points of exploration, but they're mostly linear affairs. Navigating through these spike traps? I didn't know I was playing a platformer game here. They feel goofy and out of place. Like the design of the creatures, it lacks bite in the overbearing nature of the titles of old. Downpour is the first Silent Hill without Akira Yamaoka at the helm for the soundtrack. That would be Daniel Licht, who had passed away at the age of 60 in 2017. He worked on TV and movie soundtracks for years. He's best known for his work on the show Dexter. There were bits in the soundtrack where I was like, this sounds like something straight out of Dishonored. Turns out he was the composer there as well. The soundtrack for Downpour is fine, but there's nothing memorable about it. To be fair, I would not want to be in a position of trying to follow up Akira's work. That's a Herculean task. He did an admirable job, all factors considered. I will note his work on the Dishonored series was fantastic. Much better fit there. Who did they get for the opening track? Well, that would be Korn, because who doesn't think of Korn when they think of Silent Hill? This was a misguided choice. It doesn't help that I'm not a fan of Korn, save for a couple songs. And this wasn't the only time Korn did a song for a game. They did one for the game Haze a few years prior. This led to one of Jeff Gerstmann's funnier moments.
Yeah, they all look really confused looking at this dude from Haze, and then there's this quote.
Just say it.
Okay, I'll say it. Gaming for me is a religion, and Haze is the shit, said Jonathan Davis. I had to come up with a track that can hit up that kind of rush I get from the game, and I think we really rocked it.
All right. They put that word in a press release?
Yeah, uncensored in the press release.
Radios will play songs from titles of old. Ones from the Team Silent era. It doesn't feel like it's throwing a bone at longtime fans. It only makes me wish I was playing those games instead. There are licensed tracks that play on the radio, like Louis Armstrong, The Highwaymen, Andy Williams, Chris Christopherson. I ought to hear licensed music in a Silent Hill title. But hey, I dig those musicians. DJ Ricks has some quality taste in music. Another bone thrown our way is the fixed camera angle sections. A nice nod to fans of old and the older games, but maybe want to go and play those ones instead. Graphics-wise, it's very much the later years of Unreal 3 engine look, dull and uninspired. A strong art direction can bypass this trapping. See Alice Madness Returns as a great example. But Downpour's art direction isn't up to snuff. That's why making objects highlightable was a good idea here. In the old games, strong art direction camera angles made it clear what we could and couldn't pick up. There were times of uncertainty in Downpour if I was able to pick up an object or not. The fog in town feels off. It's there for the sake of being there. It does nothing to enhance the atmosphere. It only makes things feel dreary and dull. Speaking of dreary and dull, let's look at the story and how Downpour plays out. A decent premise with dull execution. Our protagonist is Murphy Pendleton, a convict. What has he done? We aren't told to begin with. Exploring a character with a criminal background? Well, at least one we know of right off the bat. There are interesting directions you could go with it. Of course, you have to generate empathy and make us care for them. Having someone who's a convict makes that trickier to pull off. And they're not able to do so here. Even with his tragic background of what happened to his son, I didn't care for Murphy. There was one scene where I perked up where he started to talk about cars. But that's about it when it comes to showing his personality.
Wow. Look at that. An old 52. Flathead V8. No doubt about it.
Overall, the characters are miserable gits, with little that's captivating, memorable, or endearing about them. Anne, who I had to look up as I forgot if her name was Anne or Anna, is angry the entire time at Murphy. She's a one-note character.
You think this is all an accident? Just a big coincidence? This town, it knows me. It showed me things. It wants me to finish this. Don't you understand? It'll never let us go until we finish what we started. What you started.
Howard is intriguing, at least at first. A mailman delivering the mail to those who step into Silent Hill. Although the first encounter ends with the most obvious eye-rolling moment of him pulling a Batman.
Well, this mail ain't gonna deliver itself. Good luck, Murphy. Hope you find whatever it is you're looking for.
Hey, what's the name of this place?
Bobby Ricks, the DJ on the radio and the radio DJ trope, dedicates songs to us throughout our time at the beginning. He's a good character. Then you meet up with him and get these weird implications.
It's like there's rules you gotta follow. You know what I mean? Bobby Ricks. Uh-huh. Yeah, sure. Who's it going out to? But that's nice of you to think of me. Yeah, real nice. Thank you. They're coming.
Did the town just call up Bobby like that? Afterwards, he disappears from the story without any resolution or further mention, except in the comic books. One nefarious individual is Corrections Officer Sewell, corrupt to the core. He loves to call Murphy a cupcake.
Come on, rise and shine, Cupcake, you know the drill.
Saying a certain word or phrase with frequency can be a way of building rapport with a character, a quirk to be known by. Bringing up Lost again, Desmond and his fondness for the word brother is a great example.
Now the bottle, brother. If you've come to drink, let's drink. Hey, let's drink.
With Sewell, it did nothing for me. It's Sewell who gives Murphy some one-on-one time with Napier, another inmate in exchange for future favor. Murphy murders Napier. Why he does so, we don't know at this point. Turns out Napier was a kid diddler, and Murphy's son Charlie was a victim of his, whom he also killed. Murphy committed the crime of stealing a cop car and leading them on a 10-hour chase? That's what we're going with? Well, if that's what you want, writers. This leads him to being incarcerated in the same prison. What's amusing about all this is Murphy loves to talk in Downpour. The talk to himself to guide the player that's become a cliche over the last decade.
Power's out. Wonder where the breaker is.
Something I demonstrated earlier in this video with a recent example. Yet there are notes we find about Napier in Silent Hill and he doesn't make any comment about them. Why? Well, they're keeping that revelation hidden until later. Don't you think you've had a few choice words to say about this man? The one who did unforgivable actions to his son? It sticks out like a sore thumb as he comments on so many other things unprompted. Once we reach the moment where we learn the truth, it falls flat. A parent discovering the loss of their child, that should be heartbreaking to the utmost degree. But the writing didn't put the legwork in to make us care.
Let one of my officers drive you back to the command center, and we'll call you when...
Where's my boy? Is he out there? Charlie! 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 Charlie!
It's like the scene in Homecoming where Alex has to decide if he'll shoot his mom. Something that should be a major moment falls flat because the writing just wasn't there. With prison being a major element in the story of Downpour, I'm surprised they didn't make more use of it. Exploring a location full of criminals with a variety of heinous crimes, you could go in some dark directions with that. Or perhaps members of the Order ended up in the prison, and their influence is spreading within the prison walls. It's like Homecoming. They had a solid setup, but decided to take it in a lame direction. Being transferred to another prison, the bus crashes and Murphy is free. Instead of ending up right in Silent Hill, we have an unnecessary stretch prior to arriving in town. You could have cut this whole section and there would be next to no loss. It would have given them more time to flesh out the town. There are a couple of notable moments during this stretch, but for all the wrong reasons. We have a couple of press A or B to make a decision moments. They feel out of place and immersion breaking. There is no reason they couldn't have been done through gameplay. With Anne hanging onto the ledge, we could either approach her or walk away. The same goes for JP when he's on the edge. Either go over to talk to him or leave him be. It's funny because the game does something with it later, but most of it done through gameplay. We'll return to that later. When we arrive in the town of Silent Hill, it's not this grand moment. It's more like, oh, we're here now, finally. Now the game begins. Again, why didn't we just start here right after the bus crashed? One of the more puzzling design choices was having these cop cars patrolling the streets. If you're spotted, you have to deal with a group of the most annoying enemies in the game. Running away from these buggers becomes that much more frustrating as a result. That scream has a long range and can stun you for some time. One side quest allows you to get rid of the cars. The game does get better by a noticeable degree once we reach the Centennial building. By no means great, but it plays more to this series' strengths. Better than the sections from Homecoming, although that isn't high praise. Next section on the critical path, St. Maria's Monastery, is even better. Some of the game's better moments happen here, along with some moments that don't land in their execution. The section where we set up the Hansel and Gretel play and the end result is well done. It's a moment on the critical path that comes closest to capturing that classic Silent Hill vibe. There is a tense bit of finding a key. It's in one of these three corpses' stomachs. Wheeling them over to the X-ray, there is some sense of dread if one of them would pop up. But hey, it got me invested in tense about what was going to happen. Something that was a rarity in Downpour. Throughout the monastery, we're collecting pieces to the Boogeyman rhyme. The scene with the appearance of the Boogeyman in said rhyme is a great example of the story missing the mark. First, the design of the Boogeyman, the signature monster of Downpour. This is what they picked for the design? It gives more credence to that story earlier about the lead animators saying the producers rejected design after design. Some concept art that was released wasn't outstanding, but far better than the end result. The second aspect is the Boogeyman rhyme itself. Do you know what made this part a lot more interesting? If the game checked if you were paying attention to the rhyme. Instead of Murphy automatically citing the rhyme, what if we had to choose what the next line was amongst the list of choices? This scene could have been far more engaging. It was one of the most important scenes of the game loses its luster as a result.
Nowhere left for you. Nowhere left for you to run. Every fault laid bare in the open. Duh! Leave him alone, damn it!
I do like the nun we come across here. She has that aura of mystery about her, but at the same time lacks the feel of mystery from past titles. Feels more like they're trying to confuse you for the sake of it.
So often the answers are before us, Murphy. If only we allow ourselves to see them.
Why are you doing this to me?
There were those who dwelt in darkness and in the shadow of death, prisoners in misery and chains, because they had rebelled against the word of God.
The last stretch on the critical path is the prison. In some aspects, it's a well-done section. The atmosphere and design are decent. The final boss is an alright fight, and one of the better enemy designs of the game. Granted, again, not saying much. There's the revelation of Anne seeing us as the boogeyman, and we get to control him as we hunt her down. See here? They gave us gameplay control, and we have to catch her. Much better than making a choice with a button press. We could catch her, or let us die by her gun and the monsters, leading to one possible ending. However, if we do catch her, it turns into a press A or B choice. Kill her or spare her. Why couldn't this have been done through gameplay? Either attack her to finish her off, or walk away. And then there's the mess about the endings. We learn about why Anne is so upset with us. Frank Coleridge, her father and a corrections officer that was friendly terms with Murphy, is put in a vegetative state during a prison riot. Depending on your choices, it was either Sewell who did this or Murphy. But it also turns out it was Sewell who killed Napier in the end and not Murphy. What? Did they trick us at the beginning of the game where it looks like Murphy did kill him? In that case, it's possible that Murphy has no blood on his hands? Well, sure, his actions had a role in what happened to Coleridge, but he didn't go through with it depending on your actions. It gets worse. One of the game's bad endings has Murphy set for execution. He's being executed for the murder of his son following a divorce from his wife, which makes everything about Napier and what happened completely pointless. It contradicts the events of what we went through. What were they trying to go with here?
This is it, Pendleton. Any last words?
Yeah. I'll see you in hell. Cupcake.
The game is all over the place in regards to trying to get us to care about characters and failing to do so. It fails to make them compelling, and what happens in the endings just makes it worse. Like Homecoming, it has an interesting premise, but that's all it is. You have to execute on that premise. And Downpour falls well short, and overall a mediocre title. It doesn't hit the lows of Homecoming, but still a forgettable title in an unforgettable series. It made some course corrections from gameplay, but has a number of other issues that rose in its place. A shoulder shrug is the best way of describing how I feel about this game, or tossing a fire axe into the void. When I did my video on PT, I came across a Doom mod for it. You could play PT in the Doom engine. Looking for other Silent Hill Doom mods, I came across one for Silent Hill Orphan. Released in late 2007, Silent Hill Orphan was a first-person point-and-click title for mobile phones. If you ever played those first-person horror point-and-click flash titles on sites like Newgrounds, you'll feel right at home here. I dug those back in the day. If done right, they could build an eerie atmosphere with mostly static screens. For whatever reason, some mad lad decided to remake Silent Hill Orphan in the Doom engine, so I had to check it out. I've never seen anyone make a point-and-click title for a Doom mod. There were 3 parts to Orphan. Only the first part was done for the Doom engine. Not an essential play by any stretch, but for a mobile title, Orphan does a great job of maintaining that Silent Hill atmosphere. The puzzles are well thought out, and there's an intriguing story here jumping between 3 characters of Ben, Moon, and Karen. However, it is puzzling that they introduce a character named Alessa. And no, not that little Alessa, it's a different one. Why couldn't they choose a different name? If you're a fan of Doom mods and want to see one that thinks outside the box, Silent Hill Orphan is an intriguing short experience. Check the video description for a link to it. Before we wrap up this video, let's take a look at the future of the Silent Hill franchise. In October 2022, Konami revealed its plans for the future of the series through the Silent Hill transmission. A number of long-running rumors received confirmation of what was shown. Once again, Konami was shipping the IP off to outside developers to work on. Looking at the like to dislike ratios on YouTube, I'm surprised at how well the announcements were received. Most top comments mention, "Please don't mess up this time, Konami." Did people forget what happened the last time they sent the series out west? Or the fallout with Kojima and Silent Hills? With what was shown as of writing, I'm keeping expectations low. So let's go over what was shown. Starting with the long-rumored Silent Hill 2 remake. And yes, the rumors were true, Bloober are in charge of development. Now, I haven't played any Bloober games, but I am familiar with their output. I'm in the camp of Silent Hill 2 does not mean a remake. Granted, I feel that way about pretty much all remakes. From what I've seen with Bloober is that they're talented with visuals and atmosphere, but gameplay and storytelling are lacking. Their titles are walking simulators. Sure, the Silent Hill series has a notable influence on that style of game, but survival horror titles are different beasts. Bloober's output lacks subtlety. This is apparent in the trailer. Look at how different James acts at the beginning, how he falls to his knees and cries out.
Could she really be here, waiting for me?
The voice from Marion James? I need to hear more. This is going to be a sticking point no matter what, since the originals were such iconic voices. I don't hate them from what I've heard so far. Of course, no gameplay was shown because that's how game trailers are these days. Or if they do show gameplay, they'll show 5 seconds of a character walking and call it a quote-unquote gameplay trailer. The rumors about Masahiro Ito and Akira Yamaoka returning turned out to be true as well. Ito-san pulls off the silver fox look with grace. I'm sure he got all those gray hairs from arguing with numbnuts on Twitter. Now, what is their involvement in it? Is it heavy involvement, a consulting role, something akin to a Kickstarter backing goal, where they bring in a knowable name only for them to write some item descriptions? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now, no matter what happens, we'll always have the original. But also remember, this is going to be the first experience of Silent Hill 2 for many players, perhaps Silent Hill itself. Although it's nice to see the enhanced edition of Silent Hill 2 received a large spike of downloads afterwards, crashing their servers after the announcement. I wish the team the best of luck, because they are going to need it. Silent Hill 2 is one of those games with a fabled reputation, a title that's been dissected and picked apart for 20 years. It's a monumental challenge that I don't think any studio could be able to rise up to. Next shown was Silent Hill Townfall. I hate that name. No Code and Annapurna are working on it. Like most trailers we get these days, we get next to nothing about what to expect. On the notes of the developers, No Code, based out of Scotland, have done a couple of narrative-heavy titles with little gameplay. The founder of No Code and creative director of Townfall worked on Alien Isolation. Annapurna's output is publishing a number of indie titles, again in the realm of narrative-heavy titles with little gameplay, most outright walking simulators. Now, this isn't a bad choice in regards to getting the atmosphere right, but I feel they'll be lacking in the gameplay department. I hope they give us something beyond a glorified walking simulator. From what was shown about Silent Hill Ascension, I got how do you do fellow kids vibes from it. Putting the story into the hands of the audience does not feel like a fit for Silent Hill. It's being worked on by the developers of Dead by Daylight and Bad Robot games. Watching the transmission live, I was wondering if Mr. Mystery Box himself would show up, and I had a hearty chuckle when a blurb from him popped up. A streamer-friendly horror game to play with your audience could be interesting, but not under the Silent Hill moniker. By far the most intriguing reveal was Silent Hill F. A Silent Hill title set in Japan in the 1960s? How's that going to work? Story is written by Ryuki 07. He's done a number of well-received visual novels like Higurashi When They Cry. I'm not familiar with his work, but I will check it out. Unlike the other titles announced, the developers are based out of the East. Neobards Entertainment has its headquarters in Hong Kong and the studio in Taiwan. They've done outsourcing work for Capcom in the past. They've helped with ports and developed Resident Evil Resistance and Resident Evil Reverse. I did check out Reverse when it came bundled with the Resident Evil Village DLC. I want to see what they could do. I don't think we should expect Silent Hill F to be a third-person multiplayer shooter, but I also don't expect it to be a visual novel. Considering how RE-verse was pushed to the side and out of sight by Capcom for over a year, I wasn't expecting much of RE-verse, but it ended up exceeding my low expectations. I did have fun with the couple of hours I put into it. Nothing I'll be returning to on the regular, but wasn't the dumpster fire I was expecting. Again, like the other titles shown, we have no idea what gameplay will be like, so it's another case of wait and see. But this is the title that I have the most interest in seeing how it plays out. And overall, how do I feel about Silent Hill returning? And to be honest, that ship sailed for me after Konami dropped the ball with Silent Hills. It's hard to say how that title would have turned out, as PT was just a playable teaser, but they had the gaming world's attention with Kojima running the ship. They were ahead of the curve in regards to getting the series back on track. Now, they're far behind. They're trying to capitalize on the success of the Resident Evil remakes with their own remake of Silent Hill 2. Again, they're shipping the series off out west, something that ended up being a failure long term when they tried it last time. They had their moments, but they were more misses than hits. This has made the reception of the transmission puzzling to me, looking at the like to dislike ratios on the videos. They're trying to capture past glories, but that talent is long gone. Konami that we know is long gone. I wish these developers the best, because they have no easy feat ahead of them, but that's why I'm also keeping expectations low. In that case, I'll make 2 recommendations in the meantime. If you want a recent survival horror title that does a great job of capturing that Silent Hill vibe, give Signalis a try. It's one of the best games I played in the last few years and has an amazing approach to psychological horror and a compelling story. If you want an upcoming horror title to look forward to, keep Slitherhead in mind. It's being developed by Boca Game Studios, helmed by the director of the first Silent Hill and the Siren series. It's a new IP and Akira Yamaoka will be composing the soundtrack. There's not much information about it at the moment, but keep an eye on it. That, or you could also buy yourself a Silent Hill skateboard and do some sick kickflips. Thanks for watching.